I always feel a little bit cheated if people don't have a camera on. So if you have a camera, go and just let me have a wee nosy into your house just for 5 minutes. Actually, the reality is, I just want to see. I just love to see the faces. It's been March more or less since I've really socialized with anybody or even been to work. So I've been working from here. It's the same table that I'm talking to you from now. So it's just nice to see people's faces. Even if I don't recognize you, it's just lovely. I love to see a little snapshot into your life. I see Ray Foreman doing wonderful things with needles and thread, and somebody else, somebody Chittick is knitting, which is another of Podrig's new hobbies. So lockdown has been very productive. And I see Ashley and Damien stroking the cat. So it's lovely to get a little insight. And that beer you were having earlier, Damien, it has made me very thirsty. So I look forward to my post 10 by 9 beer. Okay, enough of me and my dreadful existence here in the hellhole of fly-infested Eden Dairy Lofts. We're going to go to our next storyteller. We have another fantastic story all the way from Glasgow. It's the wonderful Gyda Meeten.
Thank you. Everyone's stories have been so moving and lovely, and this story is just about me being an idiot, so I apologise in advance. And I'm ashamed to say that this story ends with me falling asleep in a crumpled pile on the rug in front of my whole family. I was newly married in my 20s, and it's Christmas sometime in the early 2000s, and it's our first year in our first ever grown-up house, which is a Victorian house, a mirror image of the one I grew up in. And the furniture we'd moved from our tiny flat didn't even fill up a third of the moving van. I'd fallen in love with the open fire in the front room and had completely ignored the orange shag pile carpet with gold taps and pine panelling in the bathroom, which were very 70s porn film, and the gloss painted woodwork everywhere, wood chip on every surface, including ceilings, and the ancient boiler, which needed kick-started every winter morning. But we finally had a dinner table big enough to fit the whole family round for Christmas dinner and enough space in the window for a big sparkly tree. So this was a big deal. I'd been studying my Nigella cookbooks for weeks and had planned a complicated cranberry stuffing and wrapped cocktail sausages in bacon rather than just buying them from M&S like a normal human. I'd matched the crackers to the dining room. In fact, I think we even painted it red, particularly for Christmas. And we borrowed enough folding chairs for my parents, my husband's folks, and my 2 siblings. And we were good to go with my Christmas playlist and so many sparkly lights that we'd run out of plugs. Our Christmas morning service at church kicked off with bacon rolls and good coffee, and we hugged the friends who'd clearly had their Christmas morning breakfast Prosecco and were a bit more effusive than they normally would be. And lunch went fine. It all turned out okay. The turkey wasn't too dry, nobody complained that the gravy was just Bisto from a jar, and everybody ate my fancy sausages. And after that, we waddled through to the living room with our coffee cups and our glasses in hand. And that is when the trouble began. Because my wee brother had brought me a bottle of rather lovely Lafroig single malt for Christmas. And I had bought him a rather lovely bottle of Bruichladdich single malt for Christmas. And we decided that the very best way to spend the afternoon was to work out which whiskey was the best. And so we got our glasses, we sat on the living room floor, and we opened both bottles and began our tasting session. Now, my wee brother was finding his way after a few failed attempts at college and was working in an office supply shop where he wore a lovely red polo shirt that said, "Ask me about print and copy" on the back. And he and his pals made ramshackle skate parks in the warehouse for after hours. And I'm amazed that none of them got fired. He had a string of very pretty girlfriends that we tended to meet, and he had a full-on clubbing habit, which I sort of lived vicariously through because I was working full-time as a junior doctor and I really had time to microwave a ready meal, and that was about it. So, as the levels in both those whiskey bottles dropped and my levels of inebriation rose, I decided that the time was right, I'm so ashamed even telling you this, to support him in declaring his hidden gayness to the whole family. Now, he hadn't spoken to me about any such thing. This was a conclusion I had come to all by myself, as his big sister, who clearly knew better than he did. And my reasoning for this assessment of his sexuality was the following 4 points. Number 1, he dressed really well and he always smelled nice. Number 2, at the time he sported a very on-trend faux hawk with bleached tips. Number 3, he could be very sensitive and emotional. Number 4, I hadn't met any of his girlfriends for a while. Now, bear with me, I know better and I would do better now, but I was in the very early stages of escaping my fundamentalist homophobic church background for something close to affirming allyship. And I knew that I wanted to be a good, supportive sister to him. And if he was as gay as I suspected, based on that impeccable reasoning, then he would need me in his corner. I suppose it was an admirable, though entirely wrong-headed aim. And it definitely wasn't admirably executed through a fog of Lefroy peat fumes. Now, clearly my alcohol-soaked brain cells were telling me he shouldn't have to be hiding his true self any longer. And that meant that my very best course of action was to encourage him out of his closet in front of the whole family on Christmas Day. Now was the perfect moment. So slurring a little bit, I uncrossed my eyes and fixed him with my most compassionate gaze, and I declaimed, "If you are gay, you just need to tell us. It will be awesome, and I love you, and everything will be fine." Stunned silence from my parents, from my in-laws, from both my siblings, and my shocked and horrified husband. "No, seriously, I mean it. I love you, and if you love boys, then that's great." More silence. I was beginning to sense a certain awkwardness in the room, even through my whiskey blur. "I do love you, you know. Just be real. I'm on your side." I think I'd imagined some kind of soap opera tears of relief from my closeted little brother as he was finally able to be honest with himself. But that didn't seem to be forthcoming. In fact, he levered himself unsteadily up on one arm on the coffee table and started laughing as though he'd never stop. I was completely bamboozled and also completely drunk. Opening his phone, he showed me a series of photos. I think it was a flip phone, it was that early, a series of photos of a gorgeous blonde wearing very little and pouting at the camera in a series of provocative poses, something a big sister really never needs to see. In the last image, she was holding a placard just below some very perky boobs that said, "I love Paul Brown." So, it turns out that my impeccable reasoning for his gayness was somewhat off. It turns out it really was just that he liked nice clothes, expensive aftershave, had a friend who cut hair for a living, and the girl in the photo was actually the girlfriend of his best mate who was seeing him on the side. Completely deflated at the opportunity to demonstrate my newly awakened wokeness, I knocked back the last of my Lefroy and decided that the next best move was just to have an impromptu nap on the carpet. My last memory of that horrendous Christmas afternoon, of attempting to forcibly out my straight brother, was hearing my horrified mother-in-law stage whisper in shocked tones to my appalled husband, "Does she do this often?" I like to think that my heart was in the right place. And I'm going to blame my youth and that delicious Lefroy. Thank you.
I think your suspicions were probably based on stereotypes, but you know what? Sometimes those stereotypes are spot on. But in this case, you wide of the mark. Gyda, thanks so much. You are a doctor, I believe.
I am, yeah.
What a wonderful advert for the profession.
Oh no.
You and Padraig should get together and share a Lafroig sometime.
I would love that.
Or maybe
Anytime.
Bob. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. And say hello to your brother for us. He sounds lovely.